Now, I'd like to ask you a question, one to kind of consider and self-reflect on. And here's the question. What are you most excited about right now? It could be in your personal life. It could be in your professional life. What are you most excited about right now? And now I'm really going to get you out of your comfort zone, because I'd like you to turn to whoever's next to you and tell them your answer, whatever answer that is. If you don't know the person next to you, tell them your name and then tell them the answer to that question. Just for a moment. What are you most excited about in your life right now? Okay, you got it? All right, outstanding. I wanted you to just think about that for a moment, because we just talked about how to see opportunity that others can't see. And we talked about how to go through that process. And I told you at the beginning I wanted to encourage you to see things differently. One of the things that you can do is start to think about what you're excited about right now and what plans you may have for the future, things that you've never considered before. And so sharing that with someone is huge. Now I'm going to ask you a second question, but you're not going to share this with the person next to you. This one's just for you. And the question I'd like to ask you is, if you could do anything right now in your life, doesn't matter what you've done in the past, if you could do anything that your heart desired without fail, what would it be? If you could do anything that your heart desired without failing, what would it be? You might not have an answer for that question tonight, but I'd like you to think about that question over the next several days. Consider that question and think about where it might lead you. One thing that you could do without failing, what would it be? Now we're going to shift gears a little bit, because I'm going to talk about, I kind of teased you at the beginning about the greatest power ever bestowed upon mankind. And I'd like to share that power, because it's a power that if you tap into it, the potential is unbelievable. But if you ignore it, it can bite you big time. It's the power of choice. Each one of us has the power of choice. But the problem is, see, we tend to look at things like, I have been directed in my life. Maybe I've had one option or another option, and I've sort of been faced with a couple choices, and I move on down the path as circumstances come my way. I don't know if you've ever felt that way, kind of like a river, and you just kind of go with the territory, and you've ended up where you are right now because of the circumstances around you, and you've never considered the possibility that there were other options in terms of your choice. And I want you to just think about choice for a minute and the power that exists when you understand that it's not always option A or B. Sometimes there's an option C that you haven't even considered yet. An option C or a D that you've never even thought existed that can be there in a moment if you're willing to take action. The problem is, a lot of us, the way we look at action, the way that we look at decision is, I can delay that for a while. I felt that way for a long time. For almost 10 years, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I finally became one. I bought a business with a partner, and I said to myself, I finally decided to be an entrepreneur. But the truth is, I had been making decisions for those last 10 years to not be one, because my lack of decision was a decision. So we fall into this trap sometimes of seeing decision in a weird way, like almost as if we can put it off. But in many times it faces us directly. And I'm going to share a story with you to really bring that together in terms of the power that you have in choice. This is a story I heard Andy Andrews share one time, a New York Times bestselling author, amazing person. He shared this story, it blew me away. It's a story about a man named Joshua Chamberlain. This happened 150 years ago. One man, 150 years ago, made one choice that I promise you affects every person in this room tonight. We may not be here tonight as we are in the United States of America had it not been for this one choice, this one man, 150 years ago. In fact, this July, it'll be exactly 150 years since he made this one choice. So Chamberlain was a professor. He was a professor of arts. He spoke multiple languages. He was in Maine. And when the Civil War began, he felt like he needed to join. And so he actually took a 2-year sabbatical from college, and he said, I need to go study abroad. But what he really did was he went and he signed up to be in the Civil War and to represent the Maine 20th Regiment. When he went into the recruiting office, he was the first person from his hometown to sign up, so they made him a colonel. It happened just like that. All of a sudden, he's a colonel. They thought this man's well-educated. He actually wrote a letter to the governor of Maine and said, I don't know anything about military affairs, but I can learn, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. So they make him a colonel, and he recognizes that's probably not a good idea. So he says, you know, maybe I should be a lieutenant colonel. Maybe I should be under the command of someone else before I finally step up, and they said, that's fine. Within a few months, he was promoted to colonel. It didn't take very long. In May of 1863, he was promoted to colonel, and he was in charge of the 20th Regiment in Maine. And then, on July 2nd, 1863, he found himself in a very amazing situation. Second day at the battle at Gettysburg. And his commander put him 3/4 of the way up a hill called Little Round Top, and he was the furthest left edge of a line of 80,000 men that ran all the way to Gettysburg, about a 2-mile line. When his commander put him in that position, he said, Chamberlain, you have to hold that line, because if they breach through you, if the enemy breaches through your position, they will come up over the top of this hill, they will come down and around, and they will sweep in, and they will wipe us out from the high ground down. You are in the most critical position. And if the enemy breaches this line, it's going to come through you, because that is the weakest point, the weakest link. Chamberlain had 360 men he was in charge of. You know, 150 of those men were from the 2nd Maine Regiment, and most of them were ready to mutiny. In fact, he was given orders to shoot them if they didn't stay. And so he had to give a passionate speech just to get them to come along. The other 200 men he had in his group had very little experience. They really didn't know what they were doing. Chamberlain wasn't trained properly. He didn't really know how to lead a regiment. And so here he is in charge of 360 men. And he's told he is in a very critical position. So what they did was they built a wall about thigh high, and they used these big rocks, and they just kind of locked them all together into this wall that ran about 110 yards all the way across on top of this hill. Later that afternoon, Chamberlain could see that the men were forming, and he knew battle was coming soon. About 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the 15th and the 47th Alabama started coming up the hill, ready to charge. And they started attacking. And Chamberlain and his men fought valiantly and pushed the 15th and the 47th back down the hill. A little while later, they came back again for a second charge, and they came in at Chamberlain. And Chamberlain and his men pushed them back down the hill, exchanging gunfire like crazy, smoke everywhere, out of control. By the third time that the 15th and the 47th Alabama came up on the 20th Maine, they were at the wall at this point, muzzle to muzzle, right on top of each other. And Chamberlain takes a shot right here, right on the left thigh, direct on, down to the ground he goes. Most of them figured he was out, but it hit the scabbard that held his sword, and he was perfectly fine. And within moments, he realized he was perfectly fine and back on his feet, back into the battle. They fought at this point so hard. Fire was coming back and forth that men were literally hitting each other with their guns. It was so close. And somehow, some way, Chamberlain and his men pushed them back down the hill. At this point, they're completely out of ammunition, down to about 100 men, completely exhausted. They had marched over 100 miles over the last few days leading up to this battle, and he knew he was in trouble. And his brother Tom was there. And Tom came up to Chamberlain and he said, Chamberlain, we're getting out of here, right? I mean, we're done. We don't have any ammunition. We're out of here, right? He says, no, we're not leaving. Just about that time, Tozier comes up, the old battle sergeant, and he says, sir, shall I sound the retreat? He says, no, we're not retreating. He says, sir, we're out of ammunition. We're done. We got to get out of here. They're going to cut us to pieces. Chamberlain says, collect all the ammunition you can from the dead and wounded. We're going to get ready for another battle. He says, no, we already did that. We did that last time. We are out. Most of the men at that time carried about 60 rounds. They were down to 0, and some men had 1 or 2 rounds left, and that was it. So the heat was coming on. About this time, a 12-year-old boy, their lookout, had climbed a poplar tree. And he got up on top of the tree and he saw them reforming. And he started calling out. He said, they're reforming. They're coming. They're reinforced. They're reinforced. They're coming. And sure enough, the 15th and 47th had been reinforced, and now they had a Texas regiment with them. And they were working their way up the hill. And they knew they were in trouble. At this point, Joshua's brother, Tom, comes to him again and he says, you got to make a decision. We have to get out of here. We need to retreat. We need to retreat. And if I could just press pause on that story for a moment. If you look at that situation, Chamberlain had to make a decision, right? If he makes no decision, that is a decision, right? No decision is a decision. They're going to come in on him, no question. If you look at that situation, he has option A or he has option B. A is stay, B is retreat, and both do not end well for the Northern Army. So in a moment's notice, Chamberlain is now down to minutes, maybe seconds, as they're now working their way up the hill. And they're actually taking shots, moving behind trees, taking shots, moving behind trees. The 15th and the 47th are now moving in. Reinforced, extra ammunition, Texas regiment, and they're coming on strong. And at this point, Chamberlain's brother is desperate. Please, make a decision. Make a move. And in a second, Chamberlain orders, fix bayonets. And they all look at each other like, what in the world did he just say? And again, he orders, fix bayonets now. And all of a sudden, down the line, you can hear steel on steel as the men start to take their knives and lock them onto the empty weapons, all the way down the line. I've read reports from the men who were in this battle, and half of them didn't even hear Chamberlain say fix bayonets. They just heard it happening. They saw all the men around locking their knives on, and they knew what was about to happen. He then calls Tozier over and he says, I want you to order, execute, a great right wheel, swing the left first, do it now. Now, the men who didn't know really anything about battle, they heard that, they had no idea what he was talking about. But the men who had been around, especially Tozier, he knew exactly what he just did. Chamberlain had just ordered a full-on charge with empty weapons, with less than 100 men, on a force 4 times greater than theirs, coming up the hill strong. In a second, before Chamberlain could even be talked out of it, before they even had a chance to converse about what was going on, Chamberlain steps onto the wall, pulls his sword, and says, charge, 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 and over the hill he goes. And in a second, the men respond, and they all start pouring over the wall, one after another. Now they're running downhill through the trees, coming direct on at the 15th and 47th, swinging a great right wheel. So the left comes first, and then the rest come, and they start to swing around, and they are literally running as fast as they can through the woods. Chamberlain's out front with 2 other men running as fast as they can, sword out, gun out, straight on. Chamberlain starts to see one of the officers from the Confederate Army. He sees them with a revolver and his sword. Chamberlain at this point is running full speed, and the man draws his pistol, and he's now got his sword up, and he takes a shot at Chamberlain 6 feet away, right at his head, misses, and within seconds, Chamberlain is on him, and he says, you're my prisoner. And the man says, yes, I am. And he immediately turns over his gun and turns over his sword. Within moments, there's so much confusion from the 15th and 47th. They don't know what's happened. They're blown away that they immediately turn over their weapons. And in a second, less than 100 men with guns that are completely empty, they just take 400 men prisoner. One of the men in the division was literally holding 100 soldiers prisoner with a gun with no ammunition. And he said, I don't have any ammunition. And Chamberlain said, let's not tell that to the enemy. Let's keep that to ourselves. In a moment, that one decision, that one choice has affected all of us, you and I, here tonight. Because the historians say that had the South breached that line at that point, in that moment in time, they would have gotten the high ground, and they probably would have won Gettysburg. And most historians say that if the South had won Gettysburg, there's a good chance they might have won the war. Most of us think that if the South won the war, there'd be 2 countries, a North and a South. But most historians say that's not true. It'd probably be more like Europe. We'd look at like 7, 8, maybe 9 countries. And you start to think about the time in the 1940s when Hitler and the Nazis were marching through Europe and the United States of America stood in the gap. There probably wouldn't be a United States of America to stand in the gap had Chamberlain not made that one choice. Fact of the matter is, that one choice has affected untold numbers of people. Each one of us are affected by that one choice, that one decision that ripples on throughout time. It's an amazing story when you really think about it. Absolutely amazing. When I hear that story, and man, I read everything I could get my hands on. I was so intrigued by Chamberlain and his story. But when you think about it, our choices matter. The choices that we make a huge difference. And not only do they impact our lives, they impact the lives of all of those around us. They may impact the lives of those who aren't even alive yet today, future generations. Absolutely amazing. So I want you to think about a few choices that you are able to make now. One of those choices is the choice to be happy. You know, you have the choice to be happy. My wife and I have had times, we have 4 kids, 3 boys and a little girl. So our lives are completely crazy. I've got my oldest son here tonight. My wife's not here tonight because our little girl's sick. In fact, my wife has hardly ever seen me speak because one of the kids is always sick. I mean, it's just unbelievable how that works. And so we have gotten into these situations where I come home from work and I tell her how crazy my day was, and she tells me how crazy her day was, and it's almost like a competition. No, I promise you, my day was worse. No, my day was worse. And it's this competition. Sometimes we get into this mode where we realize that, man, are we really happy? Because if you want to be happy, that's a choice that you make. It doesn't matter what happened in the day. Those are just circumstances. So we can choose to be happy, we can choose to take action, and we can choose to put ourselves in a position to look inward, think about the opportunities and the potential that exists, and make those decisions. And so that's what I want to encourage you with tonight. That's what I learned from studying the great entrepreneurs. I learned more about living than I ever did about business in that research. Absolutely amazing. And men like Joshua Chamberlain just inspire me to want to step up and make a difference. So I leave you with that tonight. The last story I want to leave you with is one of an incredible feat, incredible situation with Captain Sully Sullenberger, January 15, 2009. You probably all saw the footage, right? When he touched his plane down on the Hudson River. Absolutely amazing. Did you know that you can actually see that entire event unfold in 3D now? I watched it the other day on YouTube. And they overlay the audio of that entire situation with the 3D images of the plane flying. It's pretty amazing. He took off January 15, 2009 with 155 people total on board. And they immediately made a bird strike 2 minutes into flight. And within 2 minutes, he had to start making some fast decisions. And so what happened then was a series of conversations between Sully and the ground and the tower and a lot of other airports around as they tried to figure out what they were going to do. So here was a situation. He was asking himself the right questions. Can I make it to this airport? Could I make it here? Do we need to turn around? What do we need to do? He was analyzing the trends. He was starting to project, could the plane make it back to LaGuardia? That's where they took off. Was it possible? And then he started to see the picture, the big picture. Now, seeing the big picture when you're 3,000 feet up, that's a lot easier. He could see things the ground couldn't see. And as he was turning and realizing there were no options, he saw the Hudson River, and he made way for the Hudson. If you listen to the transcript going back and forth, it's pretty amazing because he tells the tower, he goes, we may end up in the Hudson. The tower doesn't even want to believe he said that. And they're like, no, we got runway 1, clear, New Jersey. That's where you need to go. And at some point, communication just completely cuts off because Sully realizes we can't make it there. The river is our only option. And he makes a choice. It comes in within 900 feet of the George Washington Bridge, and he touches a plane down with 155 people on board and sets her down in what the the FAA actually said was probably one of the greatest water ditches of all time. Absolutely amazing. I mean, there's footage out there of seeing this plane come in. It's incredible. Imagine for a moment that you're a passenger on that plane. You're freaking out, right? I know I would be. When the captain comes on and says brace for impact, that's not good. That is not good. I hate it when they go through the whole scenario when I'm flying and they say, okay, if there's a change in cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will drop down. Place the oxygen mask on your face. And they kind of go through those instructions. Listen, if cabin pressures change, that means there's a gaping hole in the fuselage. Okay? Not good. So imagine for a moment that you're on that plane. Because what was even greater to me than solely landing that plane textbook style on the river, not one life was lost. What's even more impressive to me is what the passengers said when they got off the plane. Go back and watch the footage. In fact, there's some stuff of Ellen. I guess if you go on the Ellen show, you have to dance. I don't watch Ellen. But they had 7 or 8 passengers, and man, they were dancing up a storm on Ellen 7 days after this happened. But all of the passengers, when they were interviewed, what blew me away was, here's the things that they said. I have a second chance at life. Things are different now. It's going to be completely different. Absolutely amazing. We don't have to go through a near-death experience to rethink the important things in our life. You can do that right now. When you leave here tonight, you can make those decisions on your own without having to come into a near-death experience. And so I challenge you to do that tonight. If you were on that plane, what changes? What changes in your personal life do you make if you were on that plane? And now Ellen is here, and she's asking you what you're going to do. Imagine what you'll change. Because whatever you'd be willing to change, those are the very things that you haven't been focused on that you ought to be. The great entrepreneurs know how to focus on what's most important. It's critical. And likewise, we need to do that in our personal life. And so that's the challenge I leave you with tonight, to see things differently, to think about the untapped potential, and to put that into action. Thank you so much this evening. I really appreciate it. That's all I have to say tonight. As Forrest Gump would say, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I am definitely looking forward to some food upstairs as well. So thank you very much.